Cristina had always believed in playing life by the rules, in being careful, meticulous, and disciplined. She had studied hard, worked longer hours than anyone else, and climbed her way into the corporate world with nothing but determination and grit. Yet, despite her efforts, life had a way of reminding her how fragile security could be. Her bank account never seemed to reflect her ambition. Her apartment was modest, and every promotion she had earned came with its own invisible price: stress, sleepless nights, and a growing distance from the life she wanted. She had imagined herself married to someone dependable, loving, and ordinary. Someone who could understand her world without needing to navigate the maze of high society that seemed forever out of reach. But that was before John. The name alone carried weight in every room he entered. A billionaire, self-made, with sharp features, piercing eyes, and a presence that could silence an entire boardroom. To his employees, he was both feared and admired. A man who demanded excellence, but rewarded brilliance with opportunities others could only dream of. To Cristina, he was an enigma, an untouchable force, whose gaze made her heart race in a way she couldn't explain. She had told herself countless times to keep her distance, to maintain professionalism, to never let herself be distracted by charm, power, or the subtle magnetism that seemed to follow him wherever he went. And yet, life has a way of testing the boundaries you set for yourself. It started with a late night at the office. Cristina had stayed behind to finish an urgent report, her eyes burning from hours of staring at spreadsheets, her mind foggy from fatigue and caffeine. John had appeared unexpectedly, checking on the progress of a critical deal, his silhouette framed by the dim glow of the city lights streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He didn't knock. He simply entered, his presence immediate and overwhelming. "Still working?" he asked, his voice calm, yet carrying the weight of authority that made it impossible to answer without honesty. Cristina had nodded, feeling a strange mix of pride and intimidation. She had no idea what possessed her to stay behind that night, but there was a silent thrill in the air, a tension that seemed almost tangible. John had walked over, reviewing the documents she had prepared, and for a moment, she had allowed herself to think that maybe he was impressed, that maybe the countless hours of dedication hadn't gone unnoticed. His hand brushed against hers as he pointed out a critical number, and the simple contact sent a jolt through her entire body. It was electric, forbidden, and impossible to ignore. Then it happened. In a moment that neither could quite explain, boundaries were crossed. One touch led to another. Words gave way to silent understanding. And before Cristina could fully process the situation, they were entwined in a passionate encounter she had never imagined possible. Her mind screamed caution. Her heart raced uncontrollably. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that this was a mistake she could never undo. Yet, despite every instinct screaming at her, the world outside the office ceased to exist. When it was over, Cristina pulled away, her body trembling and her mind spinning. Panic set in almost immediately. She had crossed a line, risked her career, and exposed herself to humiliation and ruin. Her first thought was that she would be fired. How could she not be? John, the man whose standards were as ruthless as his reputation, would surely see this as a breach of professionalism, an unforgivable mistake. She imagined the gossip that would spread like wildfire, the whispers behind closed doors, and the judgmental stares from colleagues who would never forgive her. But John didn't act as she had feared. He leaned back against his desk, his expression unreadable, and simply said, "Cristina, we need to talk." Her heart sank. The words were calm, but the tension in his tone told her everything she needed to know. Consequences were coming, and they would be severe. Cristina nodded, barely able to speak, her mind racing through every possible excuse. apology, and explanation she could offer. She followed him to his office, expecting anger, rage, and a termination letter waiting on his desk. Instead, he closed the door behind them, removed his blazer, and for a moment allowed a rare vulnerability to show in his eyes. "I should be furious," he admitted, his voice low, almost intimate. "You should be worried about your job, about your reputation, about everything." Christina's chest tightened, her palms clammy. She nodded silently, too stunned to find her voice. And then came the words that shattered everything she had expected. "But instead, I want to offer you something else." Christina blinked, certain she had misheard. "Something else?" she whispered. John took a slow step closer, his gaze unwavering. "I want you to marry me." Her mind froze. The room spun. Every scenario she had imagined, from reprimand to scandal, crumbled instantly, replaced by a surreal reality she couldn't comprehend. Marry him. The thought seemed impossible, absurd, and yet there was no hesitation in his tone, no mockery, no trace of irony. It was an offer, a proposal, and it was real. Cristina wanted to speak, to protest, to tell him he was insane, that this was wrong on every level. But words failed her. All she could do was stare, caught between fear, desire, and the impossible possibility that her life was about to change forever. For the first time in a long time, Cristina realized that some mistakes weren't punishable, some risks weren't disasters, and some encounters, no matter how unexpected, could change the course of her entire life. Cristina left John's office, feeling like she was walking on a tightrope above a pit of uncertainty. Her heart pounded so violently that she was sure anyone walking by could hear it, and her mind raced through a million possibilities. She had expected humiliation, an immediate termination, maybe even whispers of scandal that would follow her for the rest of her career. And yet, instead of the sharp sting of punishment, she had been met with an impossible proposal. Marry him. The words repeated themselves in her head, like an echo in an empty hall. Was this a test? A joke? Some twisted form of power play she couldn't yet comprehend? Returning to her desk, she felt the curious eyes of her colleagues on her. Even from across the room, she could sense the whispers, the subtle shifting of bodies, the exchanged glances, the way some heads tilted in her direction. Christina's stomach churned. Gossip was inevitable. In the office, secrets had a way of escaping, and she feared that by morning, every detail of what had happened would be dissected and distorted until she no longer recognized it. Her fingers trembled as she attempted to focus on her work, to ignore the heat creeping up her neck, the impossible reality she had just been thrust into. Her phone buzzed. A message from her best friend Mia. "Hey, are you okay? You look stressed. Did something happen?" Cristina stared at it, her thumb hovering over the screen. How could she possibly explain this without sounding insane? To tell anyone, even Mia, about the encounter with John would be to expose herself to judgment she wasn't sure she could endure. Yet keeping it a secret felt heavier than the panic threatening to consume her. Before she could respond, her computer screen lit up with a calendar reminder. Meeting with John, 5 hours p.m. She froze. Of course. He had said they needed to talk. And now, each tick of the clock brought her closer to an encounter she wasn't sure she wanted or could handle. She felt trapped between fear and desire, each emotion pulling her in a different direction. And for the first time, Cristina realized that her carefully constructed life, her structured routines, her clear-cut rules, was utterly unprepared for what was happening. By late afternoon, office gossip began to spread like wildfire. Cristina noticed colleagues sneaking glances, pretending to check their computers or shuffle papers. But she could see the curiosity, the speculation, the judgment in their eyes. Each whisper, each subtle smirk felt like a punch to the gut. She was certain that John had told someone, that her reputation was already being rewritten in ways she couldn't control. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was a strange, unexpected calm that bubbled inside her whenever she thought of John. The memory of his gaze, steady and unflinching, his voice calm but commanding, replayed like a forbidden melody. For a moment, she allowed herself a dangerous thought. Could this actually work? Could marrying him be more than just a desperate bid to save her career? The idea made her heart race in a way that terrified and exhilarated her simultaneously. That evening, as the office emptied and the hum of fluorescent lights filled the quiet space, Cristina found herself standing by the window, staring out at the glittering cityscape. She replayed John's words over and over, trying to discern any hidden meaning, any clue that would explain why a man like him, a man with wealth, power, and options beyond imagination, would propose to someone like her. Was it desire, strategy, or some combination of both? The uncertainty gnawed at her, and for the first time, Cristina understood just how small and insignificant she felt in comparison to the world he inhabited. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Mia, this time more insistent. Seriously, call me. You're acting weird, and I need to know you're not losing it. Cristina let out a shaky laugh, feeling both amusement and panic swirl together. How could she explain that her boss, the man everyone revered and feared, had just proposed marriage to her? How could she admit that part of her secretly wondered if she wanted to say yes? Sleep that night was elusive. Cristina lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She envisioned every possible scenario: rejection, embarrassment, triumph, scandal, love, betrayal. And through it all, John's face lingered in her thoughts. The way he looked at her, steady and unshakable, as if he saw something in her no one else ever had. The audacity of his proposal was staggering, but there was also a raw honesty to it that made her question everything she had believed about desire, ambition, and the rules she had lived by. The next morning, Cristina arrived at the office early, her nerves taut, her emotions barely contained. The first thing she saw was John, standing near the elevator, impeccably dressed, his expression calm, yet deliberate. When he noticed her, he offered a slight nod, a gesture that carried more weight than words ever could. Her stomach twisted. She realized in that moment that the world outside their interaction didn't matter. The whispers, the speculation, the judgment, they were irrelevant compared to the undeniable tension and connection between them. As the day progressed, Cristina's inner turmoil only intensified. She overheard snippets of conversation, caught glimpses of colleagues exchanging knowing looks, and felt the weight of their scrutiny like a tangible force pressing down on her. And yet, despite the mounting pressure, despite the fear threatening to overwhelm her, she couldn't stop thinking about the proposal, about John, about the strange, impossible possibility that her life could change forever in ways she had never imagined. By the end of the day, John called her into his office again. Cristina walked in with a mixture of dread and curiosity, her mind racing through every possible scenario. She braced herself for confrontation, for reprimand, for the shattering of her carefully constructed reality. But instead, John's expression was calm, almost gentle. He gestured for her to sit, his piercing eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Cristina," he began, his voice steady. "I know this is sudden. I know it's unconventional, and I understand if you're scared, if you're unsure. But I need you to know one thing. This is not a whim. I want you, not because of an accident, not because of a mistake, but because I see something in you that no one else does. Something worth committing to." Cristina felt her chest tighten. Every instinct screamed caution, but a strange warmth, a dangerous curiosity, made her lean in, listening, absorbing every word. Her life, she realized, was on the precipice of something unimaginable, an intersection of fear, desire, ambition, and the raw, unpredictable power of love. For the first time in her life, Cristina understood that some choices weren't easy, some risks weren't calculated, and some moments, no matter how shocking, scandalous, or impossible, had the potential to define the rest of her life. Cristina sat stiffly in the sleek leather chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The office felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in as John leaned against his polished desk, his presence both commanding and unnervingly intimate. The city lights outside flickered, like a distant world. Indifferent to the storm brewing inside her, she had rehearsed every possible reaction in her mind: anger, denial, refusal. But now that she was face to face with him again, the words that seemed so certain in theory refused to form. John's gaze didn't waver. There was a calm precision in his eyes, a weight that demanded attention. "Cristina," he said quietly, yet with the force of someone used to being heard, "I know what happened between us was unexpected, and I understand if you're confused or scared. But I've made a decision, and I want to be clear with you. I want you to marry me." Cristina's breath caught. The words hung in the air, impossibly heavy. Marry him. The sentence was simple, direct, yet it carried the full force of a life-altering proposition. She wanted to scoff, to tell him he was insane, to insist that this was impossible and inappropriate. Instead, her mouth felt dry, her throat tight, and all she could do was blink, trying to force her mind to comprehend the enormity of what she had just heard. "Why me?" she whispered finally, her voice barely audible, almost afraid that speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile illusion. "Why would you want me?" After everything, John's expression softened, and for the first time, Cristina saw a vulnerability that contradicted the commanding presence he always carried. "Because I see you," he said simply. "I see your ambition, your intelligence, your integrity. Even when the world doesn't, I see the person you are, Cristina, not the one the world tells me you should be. And I want to spend my life with you. I want us, not as a whim, not as a mistake, but as a choice. My choice." The sincerity in his voice, the intensity in his gaze, made Cristina's heart race in a way that scared her. She had imagined John as untouchable, a man driven solely by business, power, and control. Yet now he seemed almost human, almost vulnerable, and the realization both terrified and intrigued her. How could someone so commanding and formidable offer something so intimate, so personal? Cristina shook her head, trying to gather herself. I can't just say yes," she admitted, the words trembling. "I don't know you well enough. I barely know myself in this situation. And the office, the people, the scandal. What if they hate me? What if I ruin everything?" John's gaze didn't falter. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, his voice low but firm. "Cristina, I'm aware of the risks, of the judgments, of the gossip, but this isn't about them. This is about us. I'm willing to face everything, criticism, whispers, scandal, if it means being with you. But I won't force you. I won't coerce you. I want you to choose this, knowing it's real, knowing it's yours as much as it is mine." Her mind spun. On one hand, there was fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of making the wrong choice. On the other, there was an undeniable pull, a magnetic force drawing her toward him, towards something she had never allowed herself to imagine. A part of her wanted to leap, to trust, to surrender to the possibility that life could be more than rules, schedules, and self-imposed limitations. Cristina stood suddenly, pacing the office like a caged animal. Her thoughts collided in a chaotic whirlwind. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? Marriage to a man like John could elevate her life beyond her wildest dreams, but it could also destroy everything she had worked for if she misstepped. And yet, the intensity in his eyes, the clarity in his words, made her question whether she had been living too cautiously all along. John remained quiet, allowing her space, understanding that the choice had to be hers, and hers alone. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken words and potential futures that flickered like shadows across the walls. Cristina realized that the world outside, the office, the gossip, the expectations, was irrelevant in this moment. What mattered was the truth between them, the possibility of a connection that defied logic, defied caution, and demanded courage. Finally, Cristina paused, her gaze meeting his. There was hesitation, fear, and uncertainty in her eyes, but also a spark of something daring, something rebellious against the careful life she had led. I need time, she admitted, her voice soft but resolute. I can't make a decision right now. This changes everything, and I need to think. John nodded, a small understanding smile brushing his lips. Take all the time you need, he said. But remember, Cristina, I'm serious. And I'll wait, not because I have to, but because I choose to. Cristina left the office that evening, feeling the weight of 1,000 possibilities pressing down on her shoulders. Every step she took was filled with anticipation and dread. She had crossed into uncharted territory, a world of power, desire, and risk she had never dared to enter. Yet, for the first time, she felt a strange thrill, not fear, not shame, but the intoxicating pull of possibility. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Cristina's thoughts refused to settle. The city lights outside her window flickered like distant stars, and she found herself imagining life with John. Not the luxury, not the status, but the moments between them. Conversations, laughter, intimacy, trust. And amidst the panic and uncertainty, a small rebellious part of her whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was a chance worth taking. Cristina knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be the same, and whether that change brought joy, heartbreak, or a mixture of both, she had stepped onto a path from which there was no turning back. The days that followed were a storm of conflicting emotions for Cristina. Every time she tried to focus on work, her mind wandered to John. His words, his gaze, the weight of his proposal. She felt as though her very soul had been stirred. Torn between caution and curiosity, ambition and desire, friends and colleagues noticed a change in her demeanor. She smiled less, laughed nervously, and sometimes seemed lost in thought, staring at nothing, as if she was seeing the future before it even happened. Cristina spent long hours pacing her apartment, thinking about everything, her career, her reputation, her modest life, and how a marriage to a man like John would upend it all. It wasn't just the office gossip or the public scrutiny that frightened her. It was the idea of stepping into a world so foreign that she might lose herself entirely. She imagined herself at glittering parties, mingling with influential figures, dressed in gowns she had never dared to own, speaking words that felt unnatural in her mouth. The thought was intoxicating, but it came with a sense of disorientation, a fear that she would no longer be Cristina, the woman who had clawed her way up through talent and effort. And yet, even in her fear, there was an undeniable pull. The memory of John's words, the way he said he saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else had, lingered in her mind like a warm flame. His proposal was more than power or desire. It was recognition, validation, an acknowledgement that she mattered to someone who had the world at his feet. Cristina realized that, for the first time, she felt visible, valued, and wanted, not for her looks, not for her charm, but for her mind, her courage, her very being. Late one evening, unable to sleep, Cristina found herself scrolling through photos of John's public appearances, watching interviews, reading articles about his business empire, and imagining the life they could have together. The luxury, the fame, the wealth, they were tempting, but she knew that she couldn't be swayed by them alone. No, it had to be more than that. It had to be real, and it had to feel right in her heart. She thought about her own life, the years of sacrifice, the nights spent working alone in a dimly lit apartment, the dreams deferred in favor of survival. She realized that she had spent so long following the rules, avoiding risk, fearing judgment, that she had forgotten the thrill of living, the exhilaration of choosing something bold, something daring. And now, with John's proposal, she had that choice. The chance to step into a world she had never dared to enter, to test the limits of her courage, and to embrace a love that was as terrifying as it was irresistible. Cristina spent hours imagining their life together. She pictured quiet mornings in a penthouse filled with sunlight, John's hand warm around hers, laughter echoing through rooms she could hardly believe she would ever inhabit. She imagined whispered conversations late at night, the intimacy of shared secrets, and the thrill of being desired by a man who, until now, had seemed untouchable. And slowly, impossibly, the fear began to mingle with desire, the panic giving way to possibility, the hesitation softening into curiosity. Finally, she made her decision. It wasn't easy, and it didn't erase the fear, but it brought a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She would say yes, not because it was safe, not because it was expected, but because it was real. Because for the first time in her life, she was stepping into a choice that belonged entirely to her. The next morning, Cristina arrived at the office with a strange mixture of nerves and anticipation. She rehearsed her words silently as she walked toward John's office, her heart pounding with a rhythm that made the air feel electric. She knocked lightly on the door, and his voice called her in. Calm, confident, expectant, Cristina took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly, and stepped inside. John looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable, and for a moment she feared he would see the turmoil in her eyes. But then he stood, closing the distance between them with a slow, deliberate stride, and smiled. Just a hint, enough to make her heart lurch. I've thought about it, Cristina began, her voice steady, despite the storm inside her. I've thought about what this means, what it could mean for both of us. And I want to try. I want to marry you. John's eyes widened briefly, and then a smile spread across his face, genuine and triumphant. He extended his hand, but Cristina didn't take it. She allowed herself to be enveloped in the unspoken understanding, the silent agreement that they were embarking on a path filled with uncertainty, but also with promise. I won't lie, she admitted softly, her gaze meeting his. This scares me more than anything, but I think it's worth it. Worth the risk, worth the change. I want to see where this goes. With you. John's smile deepened, and for the first time, Cristina felt the weight of possibility, the exhilaration of daring to embrace something extraordinary. Then it's decided, he said, his tone steady, almost reverent. We'll navigate this together, every step, every challenge. But Cristina, know this, I don't make promises lightly, and when I choose something, I choose it fully. You have my word. As Cristina left his office that day, the city lights seemed brighter, the air lighter, and the possibilities endless. She felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known she had been missing, the liberation that came from choosing boldly, from stepping into a life that could terrify her, challenge her, and ultimately transform her. That night, as she lay in bed, she let herself imagine the life ahead. Not just the wealth or status, but the intimacy, the trust, the exhilaration of loving and being loved by someone like John. And amidst the fear, the uncertainty, and the whispers of doubt, she allowed herself one undeniable truth. For the first time, Cristina felt alive. Cristina's life changed overnight, though the world around her seemed to move at its usual, indifferent pace. Becoming John's fiancé was like stepping into a parallel universe, where rules no longer applied, where doors opened effortlessly, and the weight of financial struggle and uncertainty seemed to evaporate with the flick of a hand. She walked into work the next day with a mixture of awe and apprehension, knowing that every glance, every whisper, every subtle shift in posture among her colleagues carried layers of curiosity, envy, and judgment. John was true to his word. He walked beside her, protective yet confident, navigating the office dynamics as if they were his personal chessboard. The people who had once whispered behind her back now stared openly, some with admiration, others with thinly veiled resentment. Cristina could feel the shift in power immediately. She was no longer just an employee. She was someone chosen, someone seen, someone extraordinary in the eyes of the world. And yet, the title brought unexpected pressure. Every mistake felt amplified, every hesitation noted, every misstep magnified under the invisible spotlight that John's presence cast. Their life outside the office was even more surreal. John introduced Cristina to the world she had only glimpsed in magazines. Penthouses with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, art collections worth millions, exclusive gala events where the elite of society mingled with the ease of familiarity. Cristina, who had once worried about rent and overdue bills, now found herself learning the delicate etiquette of champagne toasts, charitable auctions, and introductions that carried silent weight and consequence. Every day was a lesson, every interaction a subtle test, and Cristina realized quickly that life as John's fiancée required not only grace, but strategy. Yet, amidst the glamour and sophistication, it was the small moments that truly unsettled and captivated her. The way John would glance at her during a crowded event, his eyes holding a quiet reassurance that no one else could see, the gentle brush of his hand against hers as they walked through the marble hallways of his office tower, the rare private smiles he gave her when the world wasn't looking, moments that felt intimate, personal, and undeniably theirs. These glimpses of vulnerability and warmth contrasted sharply with the formidable, commanding man the world saw, and Cristina found herself drawn to both sides of him in ways she hadn't anticipated. The early days were not without challenges. Gossip spread like wildfire, and colleagues who had once been indifferent or friendly now treated her with a mixture of suspicion and envy. Invitations to lunch were suddenly scarce, and the subtle hostility of whispered remarks and sidelong glances became a constant backdrop to her work. Cristina felt the sting of isolation at times, the loneliness of navigating this new world without her usual support system. But John's presence was a constant anchor. He never demanded perfection, never criticized her for mistakes in private, and always made it clear that she was valued for who she was, not for the mistakes or insecurities she feared exposing. There were also moments of doubt, moments when Cristina questioned whether she had made the right choice. Could she truly fit into this world? Could she adapt to the expectations, the scrutiny, and the invisible rules of high society? And more importantly, could she trust her heart to someone whose life had been so different, whose past she had only begun to glimpse? Each night, she wrestled with these questions, turning them over in her mind like stones, examining every angle, every possibility, every risk. But the growing intimacy between them made the answers less important. A private dinner at a rooftop restaurant, the city lights twinkling like stars beneath them, brought laughter and conversation that was theirs alone. A quiet morning in his penthouse, sharing coffee and watching the sunrise, revealed the gentle care behind his formidable exterior. The way he remembered the smallest details about her. The way he adjusted his schedule to spend even a few extra minutes with her made Christina's heart swell with emotions she hadn't dared to acknowledge before. She found herself thinking about him constantly, not just his wealth, his power, or his status, but the man himself, John. Complex, commanding, and unexpectedly tender. She began to anticipate his texts, his calls, the moments when he would glance at her with that quiet intensity that seemed to strip away all pretense. She realized that the fear and apprehension that had defined the first days of their engagement were giving way to something more profound, a connection that was equal parts exhilarating, comforting, and terrifying. And yet, life as John's fiancée was not a fairy tale free from conflict. Cristina soon encountered the subtle challenges of navigating jealousy, scrutiny, and expectations from friends, family, and society. Invitations to exclusive events were double-edged swords. Glamorous, yes, but also rife with potential missteps in judgment. Every smile she received was measured. Every compliment weighed against invisible standards. The world had changed for her, and she had to adapt, not just to the luxury, but to the constant observation that came with being tied to someone of John's stature. Through it all, John remained a constant grounding force. He didn't just open doors and provide wealth. He guided her gently, supporting her as she learned, faltered, and grew into this new version of herself. And in those moments, quiet, private, unspectacular, Cristina began to understand that love wasn't just about grand gestures or public declarations. It was about presence, trust, and the subtle ways two people could understand each other without a single word spoken. By the end of the first month as his fiancée, Cristina had learned a powerful lesson. Life could be terrifying, exhilarating, and overwhelmingly beautiful all at once. And sometimes, the most extraordinary experiences came not from careful planning or cautious living, but from daring to leap into the unknown, trusting that the person beside you would catch you if you fell. Life with John had begun to feel like a whirlwind, a dizzying dance of wealth, luxury, and intoxicating intimacy. Cristina was learning to navigate it, to find her footing in a world that demanded poise, intelligence, and relentless confidence. Yet just when she thought she could breathe, when the rhythm of their life together seemed steady, the first ripple of unease arrived, a whisper from the past that refused to remain buried. It happened during an evening gala, an event bathed in crystal chandeliers and soft golden light. Cristina had spent hours preparing, choosing a gown that balanced elegance with subtlety, knowing that every eye in the room would inevitably find her. John was at her side, effortlessly commanding attention with his charm and presence, his hand warm against hers, steady and reassuring. For a moment, Cristina allowed herself to relax, to believe that she had carved a place for herself, not just in his world, but in his heart. Then she saw her, a woman whose presence seemed to shift the very air, whose smile carried an intimacy that made Cristina's stomach knot with unease. She was striking, polished, and unmistakably familiar with John, a familiarity that went beyond friendship or business. Cristina's chest tightened as she watched the way John's eyes flicked toward her, the subtle recognition that passed between them in an instant, a silent acknowledgement of shared history. Cristina wanted to retreat, to vanish into the shadows, where the whispers of insecurity and jealousy wouldn't reach her. But she stood her ground, forcing herself to meet John's gaze, to search for the truth in his eyes. And there it was, the flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by control, the mastery of expression that had always defined him. John's hand tightened slightly around hers, grounding her, reminding her that they were in this together. Yet the tension in the room was palpable. After the gala, Cristina confronted John in the quiet sanctuary of his penthouse, her voice trembling, despite her best efforts to remain composed. "Who was she?" she asked, the words spilling out in a mixture of fear and accusation. "The woman at the gala, the one you seemed familiar with. Who is she to you?" John's expression softened, but there was a weight in his eyes that made her heart ache with uncertainty. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture rare enough to unsettle Cristina further. "Her name is Vanessa," he began carefully. "She's someone from my past. A business partner, yes, but also someone who meant more to me than I ever expected. We had a history, but it's over now. It doesn't matter anymore." Cristina's pulse raced. Her mind struggled to process the revelation. "It doesn't matter. How can you be so sure? You smiled at her. She stopped herself, swallowing hard. The jealousy, the fear, the insecurity, it all surged at once. A storm she had never anticipated. John stepped closer, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "Cristina, look at me," he said, his voice steady, grounding. What I felt in the past, what I shared with her, it's history. It has no bearing on us. You are my present, my choice, and my future. I promise you, nothing from my past can take that away." Cristina wanted to believe him, to trust the man she had chosen to marry. And yet, the seed of doubt had been planted. She realized that being with John wasn't just about navigating luxury or adapting to high society. It was also about facing the ghosts of the past, the remnants of his life before her, and proving that their bond could withstand more than temptation and jealousy. The days that followed were tense. Vanessa, it seemed, was not one to vanish quietly into the background. She appeared at business meetings, social gatherings, and even within whispered corridors of the office. Her presence a constant reminder of the life John had led before Cristina. Each encounter tested Cristina's patience, her confidence, and her trust in him. Yet John never faltered. He was patient, attentive, and unwavering, constantly reassuring Cristina in small gestures. A hand on her back during a crowded event, a protective glance, a whispered reminder that she was the one he had chosen. Cristina began to understand that love, especially in the lives of people like John, was not just about passion or desire. It was about trust, about resilience, and about navigating the challenges that inevitably arose from history, ambition, and circumstance. She found herself growing stronger, more assertive, more confident, not just in the world she had stepped into, but in her relationship with him. And then came the turning point, a private moment, stolen away from the scrutiny of the office, the media, and society's relentless gaze. John took her to the balcony of his penthouse, the city lights sprawling endlessly below them. And for the first time, Cristina felt the weight of his sincerity, the depth of his emotion. "Cristina," he said quietly, taking both her hands in his, "I need you to know that no one, past or present, can change what I feel for you. You are the one I love, the one I choose, and the one I want to spend my life with. But this requires trust. Trust in me and trust in us." Cristina looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of doubt, any sign that his words were empty. She found none, only certainty, only devotion, only a man who had chosen her above everything else. And in that moment, amidst the glittering lights and the quiet hum of the city, Cristina realized that love wasn't about avoiding pain or fear. It was about embracing it, confronting it, and choosing to move forward anyway. By the time they returned to the penthouse, Cristina's heart felt lighter. Though her mind remained alert, she understood now that challenges were inevitable, that jealousy and insecurity were part of the journey, but also that the strength of their bond, the connection forged in vulnerability, desire, and choice, was something worth protecting, nurturing, and believing in. and as she lay in bed that night, thinking of John, of Vanessa, and of everything that had transpired, Cristina knew one undeniable truth. She was in love, irrevocably, and she was willing to fight for it, no matter what obstacles emerged from the shadows of the past. The tension from the past slowly began to fade, replaced by moments that felt almost surreal in their intimacy. Cristina realized that navigating life with John was not just about managing his world. It was about discovering herself in ways she had never imagined. Each day brought new challenges, yes, but also new opportunities to grow, to connect, and to fall deeper into a love that demanded courage as much as it offered comfort. It started with the small gestures. John would leave notes on her desk, brief messages that seemed trivial to anyone else, but were to Cristina tiny affirmations of devotion. "Meeting you is destiny. Choosing you is my freedom," one read. Another, "Your laugh is my favorite sound. Never stop." These notes became their private language, reminders that amidst the chaos of wealth, gossip, and social obligations, their connection remained untouchable. Evenings were no longer filled solely with extravagant dinners or charity galas. John insisted on quiet moments, just the two of them, away from the world. They cooked dinner together in his sleek penthouse kitchen, Cristina learning his favorite recipes, John teasing her when she oversalted a dish or burned the pasta slightly. The laughter that erupted between them was real, unguarded, and for the first time, Cristina felt the luxury of a love free from expectation and performance. Their conversations deepened. John asked questions, not just polite inquiries about her day, but questions that probed her thoughts, her dreams, her fears. He listened with a patience that made her feel seen, heard, and valued in a way she hadn't experienced before. Cristina found herself sharing stories from her childhood, her struggles, the ambitions she had quietly nurtured, and the insecurities she had carried like a second skin. And each time, John responded not with judgment, but with understanding, encouragement, and quiet admiration. One rainy evening, Cristina found herself leaning against John in the living room, the city lights shimmering through the misted windows. The sound of the rain tapping against the glass was soothing, but it was the warmth of John's hand, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, that made her feel grounded, safe, and, dare she admit it, completely in love. "Cristina," John murmured, his voice low and intimate. "Do you realize how much you've changed my life? Not the business deals, not the empire, not the empire's power. You've changed me, made me softer, more human." Cristina felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "I think you underestimate me," she replied teasingly, though her heart thumped at the vulnerability in his admission. "I didn't just change you. You've changed me too. You've made me brave enough to believe in something bigger than myself." John leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then we've changed each other," he whispered. "And that's why this works. That's why I chose you." The romance between them was no longer defined by whispered tension or uncertainty. It was defined by trust, laughter, and an intimacy that deepened with every passing day. Cristina felt herself evolving, shedding layers of fear and doubt she hadn't realized she carried. In John's presence, she was allowed to be fully herself, ambitious, playful, vulnerable, and strong all at once. And yet, even as their love deepened, life reminded them that challenges never truly disappear. Business pressures, social obligations, and the occasional spark of jealousy remained as constants, subtle tests of their bond. Cristina learned to navigate these moments with grace, relying on the trust and communication they had built. Every trial they faced, whether a difficult business negotiation or a probing question from the outside world became an opportunity to strengthen their connection, to prove to themselves and each other that their love was not just passionate, but resilient. One afternoon, as they walked through a quiet park away from the prying eyes of the city, John stopped and took both of Christina's hands in his. "Do you remember the day I proposed?" he asked softly. Cristina smiled, warmth flooding her chest. "Of course I do," she replied. "How could I forget? It terrified me and thrilled me all at once." John's gaze softened. "I want you to know that it's not just about that day. It's about every day we choose each other. Even when things are difficult, even when the world tries to interfere, you are my choice, Cristina." Every single day, tears pricked at her eyes, a mixture of emotion she could barely contain. "I choose you too," she whispered. "Every single day, even when I'm scared, even when I doubt myself, I choose us." John pulled her into a gentle embrace, their foreheads resting together, the city's hum fading into the background. In that moment, Cristina realized that love, true, resilient love, was not about perfection, not about grand gestures or flawless lives. It was about trust, courage, and the willingness to face the unknown together. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Cristina understood that no past, no rivalry, and no obstacle could diminish what they shared. Their love had survived the first tests, and she knew, deep in her heart, that they were only at the beginning of an extraordinary journey together. Life, Cristina realized, had a way of testing even the strongest bonds when everything seemed perfect. Just as she began to feel secure in her relationship with John, the first real storm arrived. Not from the past, not from jealousy, but from the world outside their private bubble. It started with a scandal that spread faster than wildfire. A rival company accused John of unethical business practices. And though the claims were baseless, the media seized on the story. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire John accused of corporate misconduct," accompanied by blurry photos of him attending events with celebrities and politicians. The whispers in the office turned into pointed conversations, and Cristina felt the tension crackling around her like static electricity. John remained calm, unshaken outwardly, but Cristina could see the subtle lines of worry around his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. He worked tirelessly, attending meetings, coordinating lawyers, and issuing statements to protect his company's reputation. And yet, amid the chaos, he never let Cristina feel like she was an observer. He included her, explained situations honestly, and reassured her at every turn. One evening, as they sat together in the penthouse, John placed his hand over hers. "Cristina," he said quietly, "this is going to be messy. The media, the gossip, the assumptions, they're all temporary. But I need you to stand with me. I need your trust now more than ever." Cristina swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She wanted to retreat, to hide from the relentless scrutiny, but she also knew that she couldn't abandon him. Not now, not ever. "I trust you, John," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "We've come this far. I'm not going anywhere." The following weeks were grueling. Paparazzi followed them wherever they went. Rumors spread, in whispers and headlines alike, and even friends and acquaintances began to question her choice. Cristina endured it all with a grace she hadn't known she possessed, learning to navigate the glare of public scrutiny while staying true to herself and their love. Yet the external pressure brought unexpected intimacy. In private moments, away from the eyes of the world, John would hold her close, reminding her of their bond. "They can say what they want," he murmured one night, his lips brushing her hair. But we know the truth, and the truth is stronger than any rumor or accusation. Cristina realized that love wasn't just about romantic dinners or quiet mornings. It was about facing adversity together, weathering storms with courage and unity. And in those moments, her feelings for John deepened, evolving into something more profound than infatuation or desire. She loved him not just for his charm or power, but for his resilience, his integrity, and his unwavering commitment to her and their life together. There were moments of doubt, of course, when she read harsh articles or heard rumors whispered in the hallways of the office. She felt the old fear creep back. The fear of judgment, of failure, of being swept away by forces beyond her control. But every time, John's presence reminded her that they were a team. Together, they could face anything. One evening, as the rain poured outside, Cristina sat beside John on the balcony, watching the city shimmer under the streetlights. "Do you ever get tired of it?" she asked softly. "Of the scrutiny, the pressure, the constant expectation?" John shook his head, his gaze fixed on the city below. "No," he said quietly. "Because I have you, and because we face it together. Everything else, it doesn't matter." Cristina leaned against him, letting the warmth of his body and the strength of his words ground her. She realized that the storm outside, the scandal, the gossip, the chaos, was nothing compared to the storm of her own doubts and fears. And now, with John beside her, she felt ready to face anything. By the time the scandal began to die down, their relationship had emerged stronger, forged in fire, tested by circumstance, and solidified by trust. Cristina felt a newfound confidence, not just in John, but in herself. The realization that she could navigate the chaos of the world while holding on to the love that had changed her life. And as she lay in bed that night, her hand resting against John's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her fingertips, she understood something fundamental. Love wasn't about avoiding storms. It was about learning to dance in the rain, together, without fear. Just as Cristina began to feel that she and John had weathered the worst, life delivered a twist she hadn't anticipated, a revelation that threatened to shake the foundation of the trust they had built. It started with a message on her phone, a short cryptic note from an unknown number. "Not everything John says is true. Think carefully before you trust him completely." Cristina's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the screen, disbelief mingling with unease. Who would send such a message? Why now? And, most unsettling of all, was there any truth to it? Cristina tried to push the thought aside, convincing herself it was a prank, an attempt to sow doubt. Yet the seed of uncertainty had been planted. Questions she hadn't asked before began to surface. Had John really told her everything about his past? Were there secrets he hadn't shared? And, most dangerously, could she trust the man she had chosen to marry with all her heart? Her anxiety reached its peak when she overheard a conversation at the office. Two colleagues, whispering behind closed doors, spoke of a mysterious figure from John's past. A business associate whose name Cristina didn't recognize. Someone who had supposedly been involved in dealings John had never mentioned. The timing was suspicious, the coincidence almost too perfect. Cristina's mind raced, a storm of fear and doubt threatening to unravel everything. That evening, Cristina confronted John. She stood in his office, hands clenched at her sides, heart pounding with a mixture of anger and fear. "John," she began, her voice trembling, I need to know the truth. Is there something you haven't told me? Someone from your past? A secret you're keeping?" John's expression darkened, but there was no hesitation in his eyes. He stepped closer, his presence both commanding and tender. "Cristina," he said calmly, "I've told you everything that matters, everything that could affect us. But if doubts are creeping into your mind, Then I'll explain it all. Every detail, every past mistake, every risk I've taken. You deserve honesty, not half-truths. Christina's chest tightened. The raw sincerity in his voice made it impossible to look away. She wanted to believe him, to trust him fully. Yet the fear of betrayal gnawed at her, a shadow she couldn't shake. I don't want to be blind, she admitted. I need to know that what we have is real, that it's not built on lies or secrets. John reached for her hand, holding it firmly, grounding her. What we have is real, he said, his eyes locking onto hers with unwavering intensity. I chose you, Cristina. Every day I choose you. Nothing from my past, nothing in this world can change that. But I understand your doubts, and I'll answer any question, reveal any truth, because I want us to be stronger, not weaker. Through this, the conversation that followed was long and intense. John recounted stories from his past, exposing vulnerabilities, mistakes, and moments of weakness that he had previously concealed out of pride or fear. He explained the mysterious figure, the business dealings, and the challenges he had faced before meeting her. And through it all, Cristina saw not just a billionaire, not just a powerful man, but someone human, fallible, honest, and fiercely devoted. By the end of the night, Cristina's doubts hadn't vanished completely, but they had transformed. Where fear and suspicion had once lurked, there was now understanding, empathy, and a renewed sense of connection. She realized that trust wasn't about blind faith. It was about choosing to believe, even in the face of uncertainty, and about allowing love to grow despite fear. John pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers, and whispered, "We're not perfect, Cristina. Life isn't perfect, but what we have, it's worth every challenge, every doubt, every storm. I choose you, and I'll keep choosing you every day if you'll let me." Cristina closed her eyes, letting the weight of his words sink in. She felt the tension dissolve, replaced by a warmth that radiated from her chest to her fingertips. She had faced fear, doubt, and uncertainty, and come out stronger, more certain of her love than ever before. "I choose you too," she whispered, her voice steady, her heart full. "Every day, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, I choose us." And in that moment, Cristina realized the truth. Love wasn't about avoiding challenges or pretending the past didn't exist. It was about confronting uncertainty, embracing vulnerability, and choosing to move forward together, against the odds, against fear, against anything that threatened to pull them apart. The days following their confrontation were different, lighter, brighter, more full of possibility. Cristina felt a sense of clarity she hadn't known she could experience. The realization that love, true love, wasn't just about desire or convenience. It was about trust, resilience, and the courage to face challenges together. And with John beside her, she felt ready to embrace everything life could throw at them. John's world, with all its wealth and power, no longer intimidated her. Instead, it became a place where she could shine, not just as his fiancée, but as Cristina, the woman who had fought for herself, who had dared to step into the unknown, and who had chosen love despite fear. Each day, they built their life together, blending the extraordinary with the everyday, the grand with the intimate. One morning, John surprised her with a quiet breakfast in their penthouse, sunlight spilling across the room like liquid gold. He looked at her with that same intensity that had drawn her in from the start, and Cristina felt her heart swell. "Cristina," he said softly, "we face so much in such a short time, but I need you to know something. Every trial, every challenge, every moment of doubt, it's only made me more certain. I want you, not just today, not just tomorrow, but for the rest of my life." Cristina smiled, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I want that too," she whispered. "I want us, all of it, the love, the challenges, the laughter, everything. John took both her hands, holding them firmly. "Then let's make it official," he said, his lips curling into a warm, confident smile. "No more waiting, no more doubts, no more shadows from the past. Cristina, will you marry me?" Cristina's heart raced. The world seemed to pause, the city outside fading into a blur, as she focused solely on the man who had changed her life so completely. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the torrent of emotion inside her. "Yes, John, I will marry you." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of joy, planning, and shared dreams. Every decision was made together, every challenge faced as a team. The people who had doubted them, who had whispered and gossiped, slowly faded into the background, unable to touch the bond they had forged through trust, courage, and love. On the day of their wedding, Cristina walked down the aisle in a gown that balanced elegance with her own personal style. John stood waiting, his gaze never leaving hers, radiating the same intensity, devotion, and warmth that had captivated her from the beginning. When their hands finally joined, it was as if the world itself held its breath, acknowledging the power of a love that had survived every test, every doubt, every challenge. "I promise to love you," John said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "To stand by you through everything, and to choose you every single day for the rest of my life." Cristina felt tears spill freely as she replied, "I promise to love you, to trust you, and to face every moment with you by my side. I choose you, always." The ceremony was filled with laughter, tears, and the warmth of those who genuinely celebrated their love. But more than the grandeur, the luxury, or the applause, it was the quiet moments, the stolen glances, the whispered promises, the shared smiles that truly captured the essence of their journey. Later, as they stood on the balcony of their penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below, Cristina rested her head on John's shoulder. "We did it," she whispered, her heart full. John kissed the top of her head, his hand resting gently on hers. "We did, together." And in that moment, Cristina realized the truth she had been discovering all along. Love wasn't just a feeling, a title, or a grand gesture. Love was choice, courage, and the willingness to embrace the unknown with someone who would always stand beside you. Cristina had married her billionaire boss, faced fear, scandal, and doubt, and discovered something far more valuable than wealth or status. A love that was real, unwavering, and powerful enough to transform both their lives forever. As the night settled around them, the city alive with 1,000 lights, Cristina felt a sense of peace and exhilaration, unlike anything she had ever known. She was no longer just a woman swept into a world of luxury and power. She was Cristina, a woman who had dared to leap, to trust, and to love fully. And she knew, without a shadow of doubt, that this was only the beginning of their extraordinary life together. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. See you in the next one. Peace out.